brutality.
Tired of the beatings and fatalities.
Tired of racist inhumanity.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
I'm so tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. So tired. No more mothers crying, no more others dying. No more. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. Tired of hate and discrimination.
Tired of the second-class frustration.
Tired of religion for generations. Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Tired of the suffering and neglect. Tired of centuries of disrespect.
Gotta take your knee off my neck.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Oh, sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. No more mothers crying, no more others dying. Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
We just can't go on this way. We've got to break these chains. Now's the time to make a change. Together we can celebrate
I'm a
again.
here and a mom.
Say the name.
Orlando, Freddie, Eric, and
Say
Jamal.
the name.
Sandy, George, and Rihanna.
Say
Make me wanna scream and holler.
sick and
Sick and tired, so sick and tired. No more mothers crying, no more others dying. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. No more mothers crying, no more others dying. Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
We can't breathe.
No more mothers crying, no more others dying. Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
We can't breathe.
Being sick and tired.
No justice, no peace.
Being sick and tired.
I'm so tired.
Being sick and tired.
No justice, no peace.
Being sick and tired.
I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane Friday. We do a healing circle in partnership with the African American Child Wellness Institute and talk about what we need to do to see our minds as part of our general awareness about health and wellness, our mind and our body working together in concert, whole body health, whole body wellness. We'll come to that. Here's my colleague, Dr. Pravada Garrett-Lakansanya. Dr. B, good afternoon. How are you? Good to see you.
It's good to see you too, brother.
Well, always. I was going to do a little soliloquy here and then take some more music break, but you're here. Let's go ahead and begin. And what I want to do, Dr. B, and you can take this wherever you want to go with it, but sort of share with you what's on my mind. Bobby and I, my wife Bobby and I were watching, paying attention to Women of the Movement. Now, I don't know if you saw that series, but last night was part 3, and a dramatization of the life and death of Emmett Till and the work that his mom, Mamie Till Mobley, did surrounding and following his death through her life of trying to bring awareness, to look for accountability, justice, and to be part of the movement, to have her place in the movement. And so after the actual dramatic part, there's always a sort of a documentary that follows that gives you actual footage of the things that were dramatized. And I tell you, I'm so glad that this program has been aired, and look for more like it. I think it's useful and instructive that we always figure out how we can remember and not forget. I think that our society has wanted to have us believe that when tragedy befalls one of us, that's all it is, that one person's tragedy. But we know that the tragedy that is reflected in the life and death of Emmett Till is a tragedy that is systemic. It's culture-wide. and it's part of a process of the denigration and the terrorization of Black people in particular, and that when one Black person is lynched, it's not a single solitary aberration. In fact, it is the pattern. And what goes with the pattern is the process of attempting to hide, on the one hand, any public accountability, but not hide it because there's a certain brazenness, a certain arrogance, and a certain intention of putting this in front of Black people, therefore terrorizing us into a certain submission. If you know what's good for you, you won't speak up, you won't look a white person in the eye, you won't get in their way, you'll take low, you'll stand on the side of the road and let them pass, and you'll never talk back to them. You'll always say yes sir and no, and you know the code, you know all the processes. So I think it's critical now, Dr. B, that we keep seeing stories like this. Take the time to have the memories in our own minds and bodies. What's the right word? Restored, not invigoration is not the word, but I don't know if reveal. Well, I can't think of the exact word that I want to say, but to have these memories stirred, shaken, come out of any learned slumber. I think we've been taught and socialized to keep these stories and these fears in a place where we know how to operate for fear of the consequence of the thing, but we don't. We also know that we can't talk about the thing, and we can't confront the thing. And I think that we're both confronting it, and now more than ever, continue to talk about it. I think we always have, but the information environment around us has pretended and postured this idea that number one, it wasn't happening the way we thought it was happening. Number two, is that we were unconcerned, and that we were by and large, despite those things, happy with our condition, our fate, or we accepted the fact that whatever conditions we experience are a consequence of our own inadequacy and our own failure, our own deficit. So that's kind of what's on my mind. How do we talk about that and continue to tell the story? I was reaching out to Deborah Watt, and I don't know if somebody's listening who's got Deborah Watt's contact information. I'd love to have her join this program. She is the cousin of Emmett Till and has been leading the Emmett Till Foundation based here in Minnesota. There are several different organizations out of the family trying to keep the work of Mamie Till Mobley alive, and also the memory of Emmett Till alive. So if someone is listening that has a way to reach Deborah, ask her to join this call. And if you are either through YouTube or Facebook involved and listening and want to weigh in, we'd love to have your voice, your thoughts. And the way you do that is go to the comment section if you're on YouTube and drop us your email address. We'll send you a link and bring you onto the program. And I think we can do the same thing on Facebook. If you're watching this on Facebook, we'd like you to drop us a direct message or a comment, and we can send you a link to come onto the show to hear your voice, your thoughts, your ideas. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, the program today. Healing Fridays, my colleague, Dr. Bravada Garrett Akansanya. Dr. B, how you doing?
I'm all right, brother. And I just want to say that the reason it really has resonated with me this week is just I think about how power is organized in our society. And those of us who work in the field of mental health, we're very familiar with a model of abuse and control. It's called the abuse and control and power model. And that power model has been used when we talk about domestic violence. And so when there's domestic violence, there are a series of behaviors that the perpetrator engages in that impacts and creates of violence toward the victim and the people who end up surviving. And one of them is, of course, is isolation. So if you isolate the person and you don't feel like it's a group thing, it's a me thing, that's the first sign. Then there's emotional abuse. Uh, Dr. Oliver Williams is trying to join us right now.
Great.
If there's abuse of a person, not only do we talk about isolating them, we create victimhood by engaging in emotional abuse, make them feel like they're less than, they're not good enough, they're not worthy, they're not equal. And then we have, of course, sexual violence or gender violence. And that violence includes from way back then how Black men would be castrated and Black women would be raped, and how they now use our bodies in different ways to aid in the, like you said, the profit of our mishaps and our misery through prison systems and foster care systems. And that, so those are ways that they do that. Another thing they do to create violence toward us is economic abuse. And we know for every dollar white man gets, a white woman gets 72 cents. But for every dollar a white person gets, we only get 63 cents as Black people. So that emotional, that financial, that physical abuse, the making it, one of the worst ones is, I think, intimidation. And I grew up in the South where I actually have seen Klansmen. I actually have seen people burning crosses. I actually have seen police officers pulling me over and telling me to get out of the car. And understanding, like, how did this get to the point that you feel like I need to get out of the car? I mean, it's ridiculous how scary it is to be in Black America. And like Baldwin said, you know, when you face that reality, you're gonna be in a perpetual state of anger as a Black person in America, because that anger is behind. But the anger is always the second emotion. That's what we learn as therapists. But before that anger comes fear. Before that anger comes shame. Before that anger comes hurt and disappointment. And so all of these harms show out in our behavior. And that young Emmett Till, when he showed up, he came from a place where he felt like it was okay to be Black. He came from a place where he felt like it's okay to be a kid and you know, you can dare me, nothing wouldn't happen to me up in Chicago if I say something like that to a white person or wherever it was. He didn't have that fear because he didn't realize. And then when his parent, like we all with our Black children, girls and boys nowadays, we have the talk. We have to give them the talk. And it's so bad that in the driver's manual that was released this last year, they even had a section in it to what to do if you're stopped by a police officer in the Minnesota driver's manual. But those very tips that they tell you to follow, you can't trust them because they're not going to follow them themselves. So here we are in this space of perpetually being hyper vigilant. That's what we have to teach our children to survive. Be hyper vigilant. That takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of pain. It takes a lot of self-preservation. Having to be in that state of high alert. And then they wonder why our kids are traumatized. Because it not only, that lesson has not only been verbal to us, brother, it's been visceral. Because we know from those studies with mice that those mice got shocked every 20 seconds. And then when they separated the mice from the shock and they put the smell of cherry blossom, which had been paired with the shock, that those mice acted as if they were physically being shocked. Then after those mice had babies with another set of mice who had never been shocked, they took the parent mice from the cage. They filled the cage with cherry blossom, and the baby mice, their whole DNA had carried the labor of that fear. That it had created fear response to something they didn't ever have experienced as being paired with fear. So then these baby mice reacted viscerally to that smell of cherry blossom as if they'd been shocked. And that this characteristic, this problem, brother, it went on for 3 generations before it died out. Now, why? Since it's been 400 years that we've been abused, why is it that we still carry trauma? Because the shock hasn't stopped.
Reinforced again and again. I wanted to ask you, Dr. B, to talk about your own story, to share that. And before you do, it just reminds me, because I like sharing this. I mean, I don't like sharing it, but I feel the need to share it because my wife, Bobby, always talks about being in Crystal Springs, Mississippi, where she was born and grew up. And her grandmother, they called, and I called the grandmother Good Mama, Ada Willis Ford. And she were downtown in the small town store. Crystal Springs is a town of around 4,000 or 5,000 people. So, it's like 1 street or 2 streets downtown.
Yep.
And they went into the grocery store where they always shopped. And she said she remembered accidentally bumping into another child her age. She was maybe 8, 7 at the time. But she remembers experiencing mortal fear. How does a 7-year-old know and experience the trauma that 7-year-old describes as mortal fear? She says she actually today remembers thinking that she might die that day, that very day. And so that's one story. Then she also talks about, I think I mentioned this last week, where she and some friends were coming from a game or something downtown, and were walking, and some white man pulls up to the group. And the several of them took off in different directions, and she even ran somewhere into like a big storm drain that went under a viaduct. She don't know how she got there, how she left, but that's how driven she was, wanting to stay alive. She knew what could be the consequence of a white man driving slow. And approaching some kids. I'm not sure if that was the incident. It was 2 incidents. One was one white man, but another was a bunch of white kids that came upon and wanted to flex in front of black kids, and they knew to take off running. I keep those memories, those stories in mind, and I've said this before, but I always think about the instruction. You talked about the talk. When I was around 12, my great aunt, who was probably 95, 96 at the time, bedridden, lived with us at our home in Kansas City, called me in and said, Alvin, always remember when you around white folks to say yes'm. That was the word she used, yes'm, and NALSA. And, and I just remember Dr. B burning up inside. I was angry, mad, and my body was mad because my body broke into a sweat, and I was hot because I didn't enjoy this instruction because it went against what my family and parents were raising me to be, and that is a thinker, a doer, a confident, a developing 12-year-old moving into, adulthood or teenagerhood, whatever. And here it was an elder saying, here's what you got to do. If you want, and the proof of that is she was alive, right? And we know the stories of people that were not. We already knew about Emmett Till.
That's right.
And so how many, it all makes sense when you talk about the retention. This trauma stays in the body generations. And so we're experiencing this trauma from, 400 years of oppression because the stimulus still exists. And the trauma may have changed the traumatic activity. The things that bring the trauma may have shifted in shape, form, but they still exist, and they still do the same damage to us that they've done in the past. And they'll continue probably, I think, Doctor, until we figure out a way to end it.
That's right.
Because I don't think that the ones who are delivering the trauma have any incentive to change. They benefit. So what do we do?
Well, the main thing that we have to do is recognize that, one, that the shame that we carry, the pain that we carry, is very real.
Mhm.
And it's not made up. It's not in our heads. Like you said, it's in our whole bodies, and it comes from legacies of survivors. So they've tried to teach us how to survive. And the world is still dangerous for us.
Mhm.
It's still painful for us. So because of that, we have to have those talks. But the most important thing I think we have to do is also change the political reality that our children have to live in. And I can say that when I think about the way Chief Arredondo responded to Chauvin when he when he murdered George Floyd, that black police chief, for the first time in my knowledge, fired that man on the spot.
Mm.
And that courageous act
Mhm.
created, in spite of all of the things that happened as a result of it, that creative act made a different inflection at that moment. That the trajectory for justice was
Mhm.
going to happen eventually, because that one act, that one courageous step of saying, no, that's illegal and your butt is fired.
Yep.
And when he stood there and did that, a black man, the first police chief in 150 years of that department, to take that step and make that move, and how much fire he fell under behind it, not just from white folks, but by black folks. And so one of the things that I think about is that we have to take courageous acts. And sometimes it may mean we don't make it to the end.
Mm.
We don't get to see over that mountaintop. Sometimes that's what it means. And so for us as black people, we have to have what we call emotional intelligence. But sometimes being strategic as you may be, it may not work. It may take taking an act that may be scary, risky, and sacrificial. And when I think about Emmett Till's mother, the most painful thing a mother is ever going to experience is having to bury a child. But
Mhm.
if you have to bury a child who was not dead because of disease or some accident, but because of the intentional, malevolent practice of racist and racism that's sustained systematically, that is the most difficult loss, because you know it didn't have to be. And so in that case, I saw the show last night, and I
Mhm.
remember when the jury was asked to step out by the judge, because they were going to talk about, the background of the issues.
Right.
And when they stepped out, this is how systemic it was. The guy who was guarding the door left the door cracked open
That's
so
right.
the white jury could hear what was going down.
That's the classic nod and a wink.
That's right. And
We're going to
that's what
pretend we're doing fair, pretend this is justice, pretend these rules apply, but we know they don't apply to us at all. And therefore, you're going to hear this even though you've been instructed, and we're going through the charade of pretending that there's a decorum here that is being honored. It's
That's
not.
right. That's right. And so when she put her baby in that casket and had it open
Mhm.
so people could see what in the world could see what happened, that is where a courageous act would take place, because that was horrific and that was painful. And she shared her reality, just like that young girl making that video of George Floyd. She shared her reality. Now, I keep getting notes from Dr. Williams trying
Mhm.
to join us in this conversation. And
AZ,
so I'm
yeah, AZ, maybe if you're listening, can you double check to make sure Dr. Williams can join the
get in.
program?
Yeah. And so for that, I was just going to say, what I'd like to do is think about the legacy. Like you were just describing your wife. When I was growing up in Texas, the town I grew up in was called Floydada, Texas. A man named Floyd and his wife named Ada, white man and a white woman, they made a town called Floydada. And that town had 4,000 people in it. That's the town I grew up in. So I really resonate when you talk about your wife, because
Mhm.
in Texas, where I grew up, I saw somebody come in front of our dorm room in a Klan's robe, burning a cross, because it was integrated at the dorm at Texas Tech. I've seen Klansmen waiting outside the radio studio when we were talking about issues around racism and disempowerment in Houston. And we were told by the police we may have to go through the back door and somehow we're going to have to find another way home because the Klansmen took over the parking lot. I've seen it. So it's not fake. It's real. And the thing that was really important and why it sticks is because the end result is always death. It's always death. And that's why white people are scary to black folks. And black folks are scary to white folks because many of them know what has happened to us and they expect us to be revenge seekers, malicious, hateful, because if anybody would have done that to them, they would have gotten them back. And so we as black people tend to be so forgiving of others, so spirit filled that we see beyond the hatred and the hurt, and we see human beings and humanity. And that's how we allow people to get into our spaces, people who aren't safe, like the young man who came to the church, visit in Charlotte, visiting the whole church service, prayer meeting, and after he sit there and prayed with them, and probably if I know it was a church meeting, they probably broke some bread, had something to eat, did all that, and end up killing folks. And so white folks wonder why we are afraid of them. They wonder why we're afraid. And we know why they're afraid, because they are afraid, they're projecting onto us that we're going to do to them what they've done to us. And if we turn around and treat them like they've treated us, and if we as people of color get power, then they're afraid that that power is going to be abused toward them as it has been abused toward us. You know,
and not abused so much, but just used.
Yep.
and what
used
they
and
abused, right? Yeah. And they in a sense are revealing, as you say, what justice might look like, but for their control and their ability to manage it and to thwart its visit upon them. That's what I think.
Yep.
Well, listen, if there are people who are listening and watching that want to weigh in on the conversation, you can do that at Facebook Live. You can enter a comment on the comment section, or you can enter it at YouTube Live as well, on our YouTube channel, or on the Black Press USA channel. We'd love to have your conversation, your ideas, your thoughts on this conversation. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Friday edition of Conversations with Al McFarlane. We call this the Healing Circle. My guest and co-pilot, my leader, is Dr. Bravada Garrett Akinsanya, the principal in the African American Child Wellness Institute, and Eva Braken's Psychological Services and Consulting. Dr. B, again, these conversations on Friday are illuminating, instructive. They feel good, and I'm glad that we're having them. And I want to invite other people to join and to reflect, to share, and to broaden this conversation. And so just I was asking you to respond to that.
Yeah, I wanted to. I just wanted to make sure you're ready. Okay, so let me take it a little further. It's not a lot of times that people get to talk to Black psychologists, especially in Minnesota. But one of the core tenets behind the Black psychology is the construct of liberation. And not just liberation of the body, but the mind and the spirit. Because we are mind, bodies, and spirit. And so Black psychologists believe that liberation is a way to find our way through a white supremacist society that tells us not to exist, that we are either invisible, and if we are visible, we're dangerous. So one of the things that we like to teach in Black psychology is the idea that we're connected to each other, that construct of umoja, social wellness, that we are connected to each other. And we see social illness when we pull apart, when we break down as a culture, as a group of people, when we stop seeing Emmett Till as somebody who's connected to us, when we stop seeing Philando Castile as somebody who's like us, but when we see our mothers, our brothers, our sisters, our husbands, our sons, and our daughters in the faces of others who look like us, we become well, because then we take care of them in spaces where we can. Then they are not alone. And no matter how much oppression tries to isolate us, we have community that gives us buoyance and lifts us and cares for us and heals us. So for those of us who feel isolated as Black folks, that's the first sign that we are getting ready to be ill in a society, because you're isolated, you're thinking by yourself, you're afraid. And if you even think about the animal kingdom, the lion doesn't go for the whole herd. He goes for that lonely gazelle on the back with a limp. That's the one that gets taken by the lion.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to understand that as we get isolated in systems and they pit us against each other so that we divide so we can be conquered. If we see this in the workspace, if we see this in policy, if we see this in practices, if we have people saying, "Oh, Al, you're really a good Black man. You're not like the rest of the Black men," that isolating language that makes you disconnect from your herd. When that happens, those are strategies that break down a community, and they start sometimes in our homes.
Let me jump
ahead,
in,
brother.
Dr. V, just to give you an example of that. You hit it right on the nail on the head, as they say. I just remember being in high school in Kansas City, Missouri, probably my sophomore or maybe the junior year, could have been the senior year. But there was a fight on the street at 39th and McGee. That's where Westport High School was. And it was evening traffic, school coming out at 3:15. And some white guys had been mad at a Black guy for some reason. And the Black guy had been trying to avoid the confrontation, but the whites were insistent. We were probably only 20 or 30 or maybe 40 students in a school of a couple of thousand people. And so obviously an extreme minority there. And as much as this kid tried to avoid this confrontation, it got to where somehow they were both in the middle of the street and in a showdown. The white boy had all this crowd around him taunting, and Black kids said, back up, back up, back up, back up, or I'm gonna cut you. White boy didn't. Black guy cut him. So the next day or so, and then here's the thing, you only saw that if you were close in the circle, but traffic had stopped, for a block or two. And what I saw was a white guy get out of the car, 3 or 4, 5, 10 cars down and head into the center with a pipe wrench. And I'm sure he went there with the idea of clubbing the Black guy. I think people got the young man out of the way. But the story I'm saying, the next day, the principal of the school called me in and said exactly what you said. Al, you're not like the rest of them. The separation, right? And I remember feeling the same shame, the same heat as when my great aunt told me what you got to do to be around white people. And what I'm sort of testifying and attesting to what you described, Dr. B, that this was a tactic to make me separate from, distant from, disavow the other members of the culture, to separate us and isolate us. So that's obviously a tactic that they still use today. And when a person in community here in Minneapolis, anywhere, tries to go against the system, what the system does automatically is figure out, how do I isolate that person and destroy her, destroy him, do something to him in a way that makes it his or her fault, number one, but also sends a message to the rest of them. If you step out of line, this is what's going to happen to you. I'm lynching you right now.
That's right. That's right. You got it. And it's in so I, here lately, since I have been watching, because last time when you talked about the women of the movement, I
Hmm.
realized that I had recorded it on my DVR, and I started looking. And my husband, who is from Nigeria, he was looking at it. And he said, "I can't watch this. I'm not. I just can't watch this."
Hmm.
And so he just left the room, and he just said, "You know what? I can't watch it."
Hmm.
And one of the reasons I know that he couldn't watch it is because, you know, when you come from Nigeria, you see a lot of, or any African country, you see a lot of abuse of power.
Hmm.
But what you don't see is the abuse of power because of the color of your skin.
Hmm.
And that recognition that being black, just because you were born looking like that, it gives people permission to abuse and misuse you. That's the thing that I think is most difficult for people who immigrate here from other countries. They're taught that America is this wonderful land of opportunity, and their actual image of America is white people.
Yeah.
And they expect when they get here, white people are going to be loving and kind and wonderful. And they find out when they get here that what they do this, they've done that, and it's very upsetting. And it just reminds me of when you remember when Roots came out,
Yep.
and Alex, it was a series and it lasted some weeks, didn't it? Seem like.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I would go to school in this white school in Florida, and I'd look at my white friends and they drop their heads,
Hmm.
and I was just mad every day. And I
Yeah.
look at them, they just drop their heads. And it was
Hmm.
only 4 black kids in
Yep.
my class,
Hmm.
so the rest of them were white.
Hmm.
And so, you know, we were isolated and we had to just cleave to each other because nobody could understand what that felt like except us.
Whoa. Yeah. No. Well, what we are evidence of is our resilience and our capacity to come through, to get through. And I think that knowledge bodes us well for the future. I envision, Dr. B, success in
Mhm.
us and around us. I believe that if you've called it, this is an inflection point, and it's a place where the cover has been pulled off of the
Mhm.
double speak, the double talk,
Mhm.
and that we are having courageous conversations. That was a wonderful word that you used, describing the clarity with which Chief Medaria Arredondo took action, firing Derek Chauvin immediately and on the spot. And as you said, something that hadn't happened before, hadn't had a black police chief, and he certainly didn't have a power vested in black people that
That's
could
right.
make a decision like that. He
Mhm.
had the power, he used it properly, and
Mhm.
that set in motion, I think, continued in motion the things that are happening both in this community and around the world,
Mhm.
around the reckoning with the abuse of power, the abuse of authority, the
Mhm.
nonsensical usurpation of
Mhm.
lives and livelihoods of
Mhm.
thousands, millions of people who were victimized by the transatlantic slave trade and other
Mhm.
communities, our Native American brothers,
Mhm.
who saw themselves and their people, their territories,
Mhm.
decimated
Mhm.
by the greed and by this ability of a system of thought to
Mhm.
rationalize its intent to rob and steal.
Mhm.
And I've heard,
Mhm.
the system, the process, referred to as a criminal enterprise.
Yeah.
Uh, the entire process uh, produced by supremacist thought can be, should be, probably ought to be looked at differently. Right now, they expect us to genuflect at the altar of white accomplishment. But if we step back and look at it differently, we'll be looking at a process and system of theft,
Yeah.
of murder,
Yeah.
of genocide, of greed,
Yeah.
of callousness, and of inhumanity.
Yeah.
And if we look at that, we have to ask ourselves, you know, uh, I think Dr. King said, or maybe it was Malcolm, do you want to run into a burning house?
Mm.
The master's house is burning. Do you want
Mhm.
to be a part of
One.
that?
Mhm.
Or do you want to know that you have an obligation and a duty to build a house yourself that you can live in, that makes you feel good, that recognizes who you are and what you are? And can you build a house not that imitates or mirrors the imperfection and the deception of that which is burning, but a house that teaches them what a house could be? And what a house could be is a house that you are both heir to and creator of. It goes back then to what Dr. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Linder talked about the principles of Ma'at, the relationship with our people and creation itself, and operating in a certain knowledge of the language and the modalities, the strategies of being consciously part of the creation, not an accidental part, not an unaware part, but a conscious and conscientious part of the connectedness of all that exists, and therefore knowing how to moderate and fine tune your own behavior.
That's right.
How you react with the air, with the water, with the trees,
That's right.
rivers and the streams, right?
Right.
And how do you consume energy, and how do you manage the acquisition and sharing, the management of resources that keep us alive as individuals, as families? There's brother Williams.
Woo!
Brother Williams, how you doing?
It's been a journey.
But you made it. But you're here.
I'm here.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
glad to see you. Glad to see you. I don't know how much of this conversation you've heard, but as
How much?
always, I'm so excited just to be in conversation with Dr. B and with all of us on this. So, Dr. B, you can react and bring Dr. Williams in.
We are really, we're talking about abuses of power, but more importantly, we started talking about the social cultural abuse of power and control, that it's similar to the power and control wheel that we use in domestic violence.
Right.
That those same tenets are on a social cultural level.
That's
And Brother Al was just pointing out that, we are resilient and that we have that capacity to go beyond what has been happening to us. And then you jumped in just about then when he was talking about how we have had to face these challenges. And when I saw you and you came in, and the first thing that came out of your mouth is, "It's been a journey." What hit me was this song, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Gonna keep a fighting, gonna keep a going until I get to freedom land."
Yeah, that's right.
I'll give you the stick with that, brother.
Well,
You.
I keep thinking the fact that oftentimes when we fight these battles, at least internally, we may not want to share it, maybe because we're embarrassed, or because of shame, or because we've have had to suffer in silence, for during our time in this land. And it would be interesting to be able to find a way to be able to share it, so we don't have to share this burden by ourselves.
That's right.
Because so many people have to. I remember years ago when they had a men's group in the Twin Cities, and people would get together, and I think they started out with maybe about 12 brothers, but after a period of time they had 3 other brothers in a basement of a church on a Saturday. And it was supposed to be for a couple of hours, and ended up happening all of the morning and part of the afternoon, because people needed a place to not only hear but also to speak.
There you go.
And I think what was interesting to me too was that that process ended when we felt like we needed to put a structure to it and to have officers to be able to do it in a way that we thought was more normal to be able to get the work done without recognizing that the work was us getting together to talk
That's right. That's right.
and to share with each other the not only the triumphs but also the challenges that we were facing.
That's right.
And one of the things I thought was interesting too was that the brothers learned to reconcile with one another.
Yep.
So if there was a conflict that came up, they wanted to find a way to be able to deal with that conflict collectively and individually between, brothers in a positive way. So, so defining what it is that's healing is the work that we should be doing, and trying to let people understand that is the work that we need to do to try to figure out how to be kind to one another and to be able to literally heal from the challenges that we've been dealing with over time.
And I think I love that you said that because, and I'm taking the talking stick. I'm going to pass it to Brother Al. So I love what you were saying because that was such an organic process. That natural proclivity to heal amongst us, the proclivity among us as a people to be collectivists versus individualists. That proclivity and that value, just like the injuries have been passed down genetically, so has those survival components. And we as providers or therapists or mental health providers or scientists and practitioners, if we recognize, just like you said, that the ordinary, everyday practice of connecting is in itself a best practice model.
Right. That's right.
And what Brother Al was saying, just as you came on, he was talking about the construct of Kujichagulia. He didn't say the word, but he's talking about to determine for ourselves, to heal for ourselves, to name for ourselves what that means. And it resonates with me so strongly today because yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I was in a training, or I guess it was a listening session around this request for a proposal from Hennepin County to have school psychologists of color to work with the students in these different schools so that we could have psychologists of color coming in. So one of the things that I found out during that during that meeting, was that if you're a psychologist of color and you want to work, let's say at Harvest Prep, which is my desire, or Friendship Academy, where it's charter schools where parents have taken their kids out of regular, they can't afford private school, but they've taken them out of public school and put them in another school, which is also a school district like Harvest Prep. When you put them in there, because at least you don't have to worry about your kids not being affirmed as Black. They got the lesson to still learn. They still might have learning disabilities and ADHD. They may have all of those things, but at least they don't have to go through that process to get to their learning. And do you know, when I sat there and I asked, is this money, these millions of dollars that you've gotten, are charter schools eligible to get that money? And they said no. Charter schools are too their infrastructure is too poor for us to give them the money to have psychologists who look like them. I'm finishing that. Who look like them being paid. So in that process itself was a policy that has been systematically and systemically created. They think they're doing good because they have this RFP for providers of color, but they're not letting you go where you need to go.
Right.
And then they tell you on top of it, well, if you've been working in a school, you can apply and get the school that's been using you before to hire you as one of their providers. Now, how many folks have been working independently in schools that that are available. So what that is mean is that we're going to use the white folks who've already been consulting to go back to these schools and do what they've been doing. That's what it meant to me. And at the same time, I'm going to say this last little thing. I'm going to shut up. I'm on my soapbox. At the same time, the SAMHSA and the APRA money, the American Recovery Act money, came to the state. They had given a program called Cultural Infrastructure Minority Grant Members a portion of that money, and the grants being in effect for 10 years without $1 being invested in it. Then they were going to add $674,000 to their budget. And before they finished the document, the people had taken the money back.
Yeah.
They gave it to the school link people, who are the people that had the grant thing yesterday. So it's that speaking for ourselves, fighting for ourselves, understanding for ourselves. It's real. And I'll pass the stick to Brother Al, because I'm going to shut up because I'm too mad.
Well, it's evidence that the battle and the struggle exist even now, even here. And that really, Dr. B, is the same as the wink and the nod that we looked at in the movie last night, where white people profess one thing, they profess a decorum and order, a system, a process, but there's a wink and a nod that allows them to have unfettered, unfair access, and that allows them to deny us under the color of rules. And the rules are rules that they make up to suit their interests and their intent, that they are also willing to ignore, modify, change whenever they see fit to. So the point is, how do we recognize that, not be daunted by it, sort of assign that to their system, their process, their nature, and come up with strategies that, given that. So I had a conversation with one of my team members today about the relationship between Black media and white businesses, corporations, and part of the national and certainly the Minnesota response to the George Floyd reckoning was the set of pronouncements that company A, B, C, and D was going to be investing millions and millions and millions into rectifying the situation. And I can tell you that it hasn't happened. It has not happened, and that the pronouncements are made, but as you're saying, they're made with a nod and a wink, and that what likely will happen is that white purveyors who position themselves to be experts on Negroes will have easy access to the resources, and that we won't, and that there'll also be systems that try to isolate and divide Black-owned media, the Black community, either divide organizations like McFarlane Media away from organizations like the Institute of Child Wellness. That'll be the intent. But we have to simply be strategic and clear enough to figure out that we cannot be without each other, and declare that we are with each other, and that it's with each other that we exist, and that we are.
I'm so glad you say that, because right now amongst us is one of the greatest strategists I've known, and that's Brother Oliver. He has navigated such hostile environments, and he's brought people with him like Harriet Tubman. So, brother, I really want to pass that talking stick to you, because you are at the epitome of strategy in the midst of a sea of whiteness. I don't know how you've done it, but if you can give us any words of wisdom, because I'm gonna shut up. Just take the stick.
Well, the thing is that I do think we're stronger together, and than we are apart. And then the other thing that I think about is that, you find people who are from your culture, who are supports and are champions, but you also, that other phrase that says skin folks is not necessarily kin folks. And you find that as well. And I don't understand why they're not.
Yeah.
Because to me, the thing is that, if I've gone to different places throughout my career, I've always tried to take somebody who was from my community with me.
Yeah.
And some people don't have that point of view. Also, there's some people who are doing work within the community, but think that because I've been in environments that they haven't been in, that I'm against them. And I don't quite understand that either, because my history would suggest that I would be with them because I have been.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, but I haven't been in the same wars as some of them have been. And I think that some of us deal with trauma in our experience. And as a consequence, we project it on the other people, you know. But I think, trying to figure out where we can find the support. The other thing is that there have been some really good people who have been supportive of me. And I think of the Wellstones.
Mm-hmm.
They were, I didn't have to come up with um, promoting myself, where I had to go through all the hoops to try to, prove it to them. They sort of accepted it. Marty Erickson is
Yeah.
another person who, was has been a great support,
Yeah.
uh, as well. And there've been other people in the community who've been, real supports. But being able to do some things doesn't mean that it hasn't been a challenge
Yeah.
in the process,
Yeah.
But I think trying to figure out people and places and ways that you can try to be supporting this is something that's an obligation. At least that's what my mother and father taught me.
Yeah.
And so
Let me do this. Thank you, Dr. Oliver. I got an email a few minutes ago from a brother in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, who
yeah,
was on our program, I think Thursday. I had convened a number of artists as creators and as healers, and he just sent me a note saying that, among other things in the note, was that here's a link to a dance. He's a dancer, and he's
Mm.
the manager. His title is dancer and choreographer for traditional and contemporary Ethiopian dance. He's
Mm.
director of the Fendika Cultural Center
Mm.
and music director of Ethio Color Band and Fendika Music and Dance Ensemble, also president of Ethiopian Dance Art Association. And he sent me a link to this dance they did in response to the murder of George Floyd. So the point I'm bringing up is that what we've experienced here is being looked at and reacted to and responded to all around the world. And the
Mhm.
power of this moment is the power of connectivity, the power of remembering. And I'm using the term remembering not in only what you forgot, but remembering as the opposite of dismembering.
That's right.
That which was dismembered, how do we remember that? And so
Mhm.
that process is occurring right now. And I think it's a process that will allow and support the re-establishment, the development, the reassertion or the rebirth of what I saw in Ghana of African civilization, the
Mhm.
rebirth of an African way of knowing. So,
Mhm.
AZ, if you're there, I sent you a copy of the email. I don't know if you're able to get it. I'd love to end the program with that YouTube piece. AZ, are you able to get the email that I sent to you and load up and share the street festival? Actually, there were two links, and one was called the Dance of Solidarity, and I'm presuming that's the one that is a response to the murder of George Floyd. So maybe if AZ is able to load it, we'll get a chance to watch that or monitor it for a few minutes anyway. AZ, put a note in the chat if you're able to load this up. With that, let's also close up today. Dr. B, closing thoughts. You're muted. You're muted.
My closing thought is around the hope that we need to be purveyors of hope. That as we look at the past, just like the Sankofa bird, looking at the past but going forward, we need to remember that we're standing on not just shoulders, but bodies, hopes, and dreams that have been killed and resurrected through us. So that today to me means that as we've talked about Black healing and we've talked about community, that healing is community and community is healing.
And Dr. Oliver, thoughts?
Well,
I call it thoughts, but it's also instruction.
I think thoughts and instruction is finding ways that we can be together and to see each other broadly as supports rather than barriers. So there are ways that we can find ourselves in a similar space. How can we be support to one another?
That's beautiful.
Great, great. Well, let me close with a couple of ideas here. One is I want to acknowledge and invite people in community here in Twin Cities to go to Homewood Studios. There's an exhibit by our esteemed brother and elder artist, Setu Ken Jones, has an exhibit that goes on through the end of the month over at the Homewood Studios on Plymouth Avenue, I think Plymouth and Queen, in North Minneapolis. That's one thing. And secondly, I have the fortune and the honor, I'm humbled by the chance to have a conversation with Maulana Karenga. Tomorrow afternoon, it'll be streamed live. I think it starts at 1:30, 2 o'clock. I'll be posting it on my social media, but I'll be in a conversation with Maulana Ran Karenga, the author, the founder, one of the developers of the Nguzo Saba and the Kwanzaa celebration that we experience worldwide right now. So I'm excited by that, Dr. B, to be moderating and presenting a conversation with him. So I don't think we were able to get the YouTube item up that I was referring to. I don't know if because I haven't gotten any feedback from AZ on it.
But brother Al, I have something I would, and if she did she get it or not?
I don't know that she did.
I would like to share a closing
Sure.
video that we can go off with. And it starts with Emmett Till, but I don't know if people can hear it, so I'm gonna try to play it.
Can you do a screen share?
Yeah, I think I can. It says, yep.
Right, yeah.
Share screen.
Yeah, and I'll try to share the one that I have after that. So go ahead, go right ahead.
Okay. Let me see if I can share my screen. Let me see here. It's saying share screen, but let me see.
Then click on the item that you want to show.
Okay. Oh, okay. There we go. All right. Let me see if I can share. I see it now. Let me just grab it. It says share. And it says share screen. It's got a big share screen. And
Hit play.
But it's not, I don't see the thing that I'm trying to share. So It looks like I can't share. Oh, wait a minute. Nope, I can't share it. I don't know how to make it show up. So that's all right.
Let me try to do that here too. Yeah, we're learning this technology as we go, Dr. B.
We sure are.
I'm going to hit my share screen and 2 monitors here, share screen, and I'm going to share this screen. Hold on. That one. And there we go.
There we go.
I'm going to play that.
And Al, enlarge the screen, that thing in your right corner.
Yep.
And it may have a button for you to press audio too.
Okay. Are you hearing the audio or not?
Not
No.
very well.
Okay. Okay. Well, you know what? Let me stop now, and we'll come back to this.
Why
But you
don't
can see
we? I
how rich
haven't.
it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have an idea as we close out today.
Hmm.
If y'all don't mind, we should think about doing next week's show
Hmm.
on the construct of Kuumba creativity. And we can bring in the music, but not just that, the survival of our people that rests sorely on our ability to be creative and make it through when people say we can't. How about that?
Let's do it. Let's do
Let's
it.
go for it.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you for being here. What a wonderful day. And we appreciate you. Do well, be well. We'll see you next week. I'm Al McFarlane. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.